Hi everybody. There seems to have been a problem with the live event that I was doing. I was assuming that you guys could see me. Hi everybody. There seems to have been a problem with the live event that I was doing. Right, I seem to have been assuming that you guys could see me, but apparently you can't. So I'm just gonna wait for a couple of minutes. And I've posted, just make sure that you say hi because I want to see if you guys can see me this time or not. It will be very, very helpful. Okay, perfect. Spencer can see me and hear me. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen now. Right? And once again, just keep me in the loop if you cannot see me, right? So, screen share. Okay, let's go back to the beginning and start from the beginning. Hmm. Okay, there seems to be this issue. How do we fix this? Okay. So there's definitely some problem with this broadcast because it cannot select my slides. This is very, very odd. Okay. So, hmm, let's try this and present it to everybody and open this. Huh. Okay, this seems to be working. Once again, okay. Once again, let's start from the beginning. I hope everybody can hear me now because this is really, really odd. This has never happened before. But once again, everybody, welcome and good to finally be here. The webinar is for SQL subqueries, data cleaning, and at the end of it, I'm going to give give a few tips and tricks on project one, and everything that I faced and I wished I would have done better when submitting the same project. Right? So let's start. The agenda of the small webinar is to go over a very, very brief summary of SQL subqueries, um, a few examples of SQL subqueries, then go over SQL data cleaning. Once again, this is a very, very brief summary. This does not replace the actual content, but I'm just going over the summary to make sure that we're on the same page for everything. If there are any issues, just send me a message. The chat is on, and it should work. Right, and then I have kept two examples of SQL data cleaning. Right, then the two practice questions that I was talking about, they're not hard, not complex, but they do require you to think about some stuff. So I do hope that you do, at least in your head, try and solve the questions that I've put up. And finally, there's project one, tips and tricks. and then Q&A, which is in the form of either you comment over here, just say something in the chat if you want to. I can see it from the computer, or I'm hosting an AMA after this, so any questions that you have can easily be asked up on the Slack channel. Right, so let's start. SQL subqueries. In its most basic form, a SQL subquery is a query inside a query, right? The inner query executes first, and the parent query takes data from the inner query, right? A subquery can occur in select, delete, update, or insert clause. It can occur in a from or a where clause. So you have a lot of variety when you see subqueries, so you do need to keep that in mind. There can be different type of subqueries for different ways, different questions, right? Comparison operators can be used, such as greater than, less than, or equal to. And there's also multi-row comparisons within in, any, and all. All of these together is, in simple words, you can use any sort of query inside another query, like any sort of query whatsoever, right? So let's move on. So the first example that I have here, you are basically supposed to get the first and the last name and the order count of those customers, and the order count of all customers that you have, right? So you have an order table and you have a customer table, and the way that you get the order count is by the ID, right? So you have your first and your last name, but your order count is another query. This is an example of a select query being within a select query, right? So your order count, which is a count, which is an aggregate function, has a where clause that combines this query with the outer query, and that kind of makes sure that you have the same people and the same order by count, right? Next, we have the SQL subquery 2. I've kept this really to show the difference between join and subquery. To be very honest, this is not a hard query, right? But this is a very important query in sense that you can easily see that there's a stark difference between the join query and the subquery method. However, the result will be the same, right? So you have an employee table named S employee, and you have a project table named M project, right? This is important. When you're doing an inner join, you're basically combining the two tables, and then you're forming a third table, and that is the heavy calculation intensive part of join. As a result, a lot of people use subqueries instead, which is the query below here, right? This query first just selects everything from the project table, right? So you already have a smaller subset of data, right? Once you move to the outer query, you just combine the two and you get your result. Once again, it gives the same result. It's just the method of getting that result that is different, right? Is there anything else? Yeah, that's about it. Okay, so SQL data cleaning. Let's go over all of the concepts really fast, and I hope there you still understand everything that I'm going to say now, because this is very important, and it does come in hand a lot, right? So left is left and right are two functions that are used to pull a substring from a string. So if you have Sakina, which is an Sakina, right? The left function would pull the leftmost characters out of it, that is SNA, and the right function would pull the rightmost characters out of it, that is N and A, right? So as an example, I've added a query that selects the date and the time from a datetime function, right? So the left function will take the left date and left 10 characters, which will be the date, and the right function will take this rightmost characters, which will be your time. So this query is actually really important in making sure that your date and time functions align to how you want them to be, right? Then we have the trim function, which is used to remove characters from the beginning or the end of the string. All right. Um, a lot of the times when you're inputting something into a database, you need to make sure that you know your data, the data itself adheres to some sort of um, to adheres to like a rule, right? And that rule may be that there should be no white space, or if you're putting phone number, there should be no parentheses, or no spaces between the number. So before entering it into a database, we use the trim function to make sure to remove those parentheses and to remove those functions sorry, to remove those white spaces, to make sure that the data that is entered is in the correct format, right? Then we have the position and the string position functions, which basically get you the number of the number where your string is found. You get the first substring, first number of the time that your substring appears the first time, right? So if you have Sakina, which is once again my name, and you want the K out of it, so that will be your third letter. So once if you use position, you'll get the third letter. You will get 3 as an answer, right? Next, we have substring. Substring is basically the same as your left and right function, right? Except for the fact that you can use, you have to put like a starting and an ending, right? That means you're not necessarily binded to like the left side or the right side. You can use whatever position you want to start the string with. So for example, if you do not want SNA, but you want like the K and I in Sakina, so you start with the substring, give my name, and then go to the third letter and get the 2 letters from the third letter, which is the third and the fourth, and that's your substring, right? Concat is a function which basically, in a lot of ways, is either used to combine dates or is used to combine names, right? So the example that I've given here is the combination of dates. You combine your day of the week with your date, and you get a clean date, right? Then upper or lower. Once again, these functions are string functions that are used for rule following. Maybe in your database, you have a rule that there should be no capital letters when inputting the name. But of course, me as the end user will not know that you have will not know that you have that rule on, right? So you have to use the upper or the lower functions to make sure that your data is in the order that you want it. The upper function capitalizes your letters, the lower function decapitalizes your letters respectively. Finally, you have the coalesce function. The coalesce function is very important in sense that it fills out the null values in your database, right? So this is a very, very good example here. Coalesce can be used to add like a no description to all those description columns where there is a null, right? This in turn, as an example, can be used as a subquery, right? In an update function. The update function will make sure that that instead of a null, now there's a no description, and that just makes your data so much more it makes it so much more better. It's better to read, better to analyze, and it's cleaner data, right? Finally, let's get to the data cleaning example number one. So this slide is a bit of a mess because I was running out of space. So let's first count the number of members whose surname starts so on the left top corner, right? We have the query itself, what we're trying to achieve, which is count the number of members whose surname starts with each letter of the alphabet, right? So you have members, right? And you want to count those surnames. You want to count the surnames and the number, the starting letter of those surnames, right? So this is a classic substring example, right? They've also used substring as a result, right? So as you can see that they've just taken the first letter, right? This can also be used with the left command. So you just take a left and use the first, get the first letter. It's as simple as that, and you put that in count, and you're good to go. Oops. And you are good to go. Okay, next. So this is a bit of a different way of you know producing a query, but this is one of the most important ways, and I wish somebody had told me this before, because this is very, very important. So many times when you're concatenating strings, for example, here you're concatenating the first name with a space and the middle name with a space and a last name as a full name, right? You do not check whether there's a null or not in any of those three names, right? As a result, you have more nulls in your full name than intended. The way to fix this is to go over here, the upper query, and to use coalesce, right? This is a classic example of combining names, and you just add a coalesce function to your middle name, because middle name or first name or last name, of course they've added middle name as an example, right? And what you see here is the result, which is where you can see that this is a classic example of finding duplicate. So you can see that number 3, number 4, and number 5 over here look to be the same person, except that number 5 has a middle name, number 4 and 3 do not, right? Okay, so let's go to the practice questions now, and I'm going to give you all a minute to think about what you are going to do as a result of these, right? So this over here is the question, which is produce a list of all members along with their recommender using no joins. So using no joins is basically the fact that you have to use subqueries. This is the on the right hand side is the answer that I'm expecting, and this is the diagram that you're using. So I'm going to give you all a minute, think about it, and then let's give you an answer. Okay, so let's go to the answer. I hope you have something. So this is a classic concatenation um, example, right? Instead of concatenation, they've used the OR function, right? You must have learned of this as well. So you find your first names, you find your last names, and you add them as member. Then once again, within the subquery, you add your first name, you add your last name, and you find the recommender. And then you combine those two queries by using this where clause, that where the member ID is equal to the member recommended by. And this is exactly how you combine the two. And you do not even need to use join. um, just for information, if you did use joins here, you would be combining one table with itself, so this would be a very heavy function, right? Practice question number 2. This is going to be in the same way. I'm going to give you a minute. This is a date function. So you need to make a date from a string with the format 21/09/2008 and cast it into a date data type. Now, to give you an example, give you a bit of a reference, um, the date data type takes in only the month, then a dash, then the days, and sorry, my bad. It takes the year, dash, month, dash, date. That's how the date is structured in SQL, right? So that's the date data type, and that's the input that you have to give. That means you have to make a new string out of the given string, and then you can only cast it into a date data type. So I'm going to give you all a minute. Let's see if you can figure out how to solve this. Okay, so we're back and let's go forward. So once again, you use substring along with concatenation, and you can use the left function or the right function. They've, as an example, use substring and left. You can use either the left, the right. You can use the left, right, and substring together. Uh, Instead of the OR function, the concat function that they've used, you can literally use the concat function that you studied. Um, and casting the date into a date data type is done by the two colons over here, which turns the date into a date, right? So let's go over this query. They've taken the substring from the date, they've gone to the seventh letter, and they've taken 4 from that 7, right? So that is 2008 here. Then they've added a dash. Then they've used the left function, that means the first two, which is your day, right? And then once again, you go back and you add a dash. Finally, they've used the substring again to get the last two characters, which is your month, and then they've used the parentheses to cast it into a date type, which is now your clean date, and you can perform a lot of functions on this, which I'm pretty sure you've learned in the date functions, right? So now we're finally up to the project part, right? So let's do an overview. First and foremost, go through the practice quizzes. They will help you understand your data better, right? Your data, the more you understand your data, the better your project is going to be. Um, what you need to do as a submission is submit a presentation of 4 slides. Each slide will have a question of interest, a question that you're trying to answer. Then it'll have a supporting SQL query that's needed to answer the question. and it'll have a supporting visualization that's created using the final data of your SQL query. And finally, it's supposed to have a few comments as well on what you found from the visualization, right? Moreover, you need to submit a text file with the queries which answer your questions, right? So let's go to the tips. Uh, Run your queries on the machine that they have provided. Just run it on the local with your account. Run it with your account. It will save you a lot of time and tears, which was true in my case because it took me like a day to install Postgres properly and configure everything. It was a lot of time that was gone that I could have done used in the project, right? Know your database inside out. This once again goes back to the knowing your database and practicing the questions that they've given you. The only way to know your database is to go and have fun with it, explore it, enjoy it, right? Format your queries properly and add comments. This is very, very important because you do not want to come uh, a month from now, go back and looking at your queries and wonder what you've written because it's not readable. Readability is very, very important, and it will help you mm, write better code, right? If you come back a month from now and you cannot read your own query, chances are you will spend the same amount of time trying to formulate the query again, and you've just spent double the amount of time than you're supposed to, and time is wasted. Lastly, there is more than one way to write a query. Like so many examples that I've given today are very, very good examples of that. You can use left, you can use substring, you can use the concatenation function, or you can use the two lines, you can use join, or you can use a SQL subquery. There is more than one way to write the query, so make sure that you submit the most optimized way. This will help you um, give the most comprehensive project. This will help you submit the most comprehensive project, right? And that's what we want. Finally, some of the tricks that I wish that I would have known is check the project rubric and make sure that your project meets the rubric, because if it does not meet it, um, there's no point in submitting your project, because once the reviewer gets back to you, you will have to make those changes and you will have to resubmit your project. That's how it goes. So your project should be the best version that you submit, right? Use the knowledge given to you. That basically means that there's the data is very, very interesting. You can use the data in a lot of ways to find very, very cool comparisons between the mean, median, and for example, between the mean, median, and mode, um, or between two stores or anything of that sort, and comment on what the difference or the comparison that you're making means and why it is significant. This will give you an edge over the others. It's just the more better of project you submit, the better you are showing yourself to potential employers later on. Last, a few more things is to optimize your query. Once again, this goes back to the fact that one query can be written in several ways. So, let's just make sure your way is the best way. When submitting your slides, make sure that every slide has a title, that your visuals have a title, they have a marked x-axis and a y-axis, and a legend if required, right? Come up with your own questions. This is only if you have enough time. If you do not have enough time, use the questions provided to you. They're more than enough and they will give you a good project to end up at. But using your own questions will give you something, will make sure that your project stands out, because there will be 10 other people who submitted that same project with the same questions. right? And lastly, make sure everything works. This is the first point of the rubric, and the last point that I'm heading off with. Make sure everything works, because if it doesn't, you're just gonna have to do it again. So let's not waste our, your time, right? And questions. If you have any questions, ask now. I'm also hosting an AMA right after I finish this, and I'll be up for like an hour answering your questions. So you can post your questions up to the 810 group. And lastly, if you still do not want to post your questions, you can always post it up to your project channel, right? There's lots of help available. Message if you want to, call me if need be. Just enjoy the project. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I think that's it from me.